He learned how the world could close a door without making a sound the night the bakery door clicked behind him for the last time. Rain had turned the city's streets into mirrors, reflecting neon and disappointment in equal measure. Inside the little shop he'd helped build, the ovens cooled like wounded animals, parchment and sugar dust the only evidence of a life spent coaxing warmth out of flour and heat. Outside, umbrellas bowed and passed, unaware that something had ended and something else had begun. Owen Hale had been the one who believed you could make people fall in love with a cookie the way you fall in love with a song. Slow, accidental, impossible to forget. His hands had learned the grammar of dough, when to fold, when to rest, when to let sugar speak without shouting. He kept notes in the margins of a battered notebook, ratios and temperatures, and more often than not, little lines of thought about why a feeling felt like butterscotch, or why a memory sometimes tasted like lemon zest. His brothers, Cal and Nate, had laughed at his notebooks at first, but the town had not. People drove out of their way to stand in the warmth of the shop and bite into a cookie that seemed to make the world stop for a second. Cal ran numbers and charm with equal skill. He could make bankers feel sentimental and sign contracts with the same smile he used in family photos. Nate could talk to anyone about anything, until the other person believed they'd always known him. Together, in a cramped storefront on a street that smelled like bus fumes and cinnamon, they built something that felt immune for a time to the small cruelties of the world. They named it Hale & Cummer Bakery because it sounded old even when it was new. Owen's cookies were the soul of the place. He had a dozen recipes he guarded like a gardener guards rare bulbs. He told the regulars the stories behind each flavor the way a preacher tells parables, short, true, and meant to be tasted. A brown butter pecan cookie, he'd say, was about a summer when he stole pies from the table and learned the taste of regret. A lemon thyme shortbread was about summers spent on a lake where the water smelled like sunblock. People wanted those stories. They wanted the intimacy of a pastry that felt like a small confession. The first time an investor came through, it felt like flattery. Cal and Nate waltzed him through the back, shook hands with a confidence that made Owen uneasy. "We could be in every mall, every college town," Cal told him, the future drawn like lines on a whiteboard. Investors loved the sound of that. They loved the idea of scaling a feeling. Nate laughed in that way he always did when he was deciding if a thing could be bent into profit. "We'll be the brand people crave at 3 a.m., he said, as if craving could be bought in bulk. Owen was wary. He watched their faces, watched how their eyes slid over his handwritten menus as if reading them for flaws. "These recipes aren't products," he told them one late night while washing pans. He said it without drama. He thought they would hear him. Cal smiled, and the smile had a ledger in it. "Recipes are how you make a brand," he said. "Don't be romantic about ovens, Owen. We can make this big." "It won't be the same," Owen said. "People come here because someone listens when they say they're tired. Because I put a note on the box that says, 'Eat it slow.' They come for the way it feels. People like things that feel effortless." Nate's laugh was warm, but the warmth didn't reach his eyes. Effortless sells. The first contract that left Cal's briefcase was glossy and precise. It promised scaling, systems, operations manuals, and profits painted in neat columns. Owen read the fine print in the small hours, the way he read recipes, with patience and suspicion. The dotted line looked like a thin noose. They signed. They toasted. The first month, the shop hummed with a new light. Someone hired a photographer and took pictures of cookie towers for a magazine that liked to sell the idea of effortless art. Owen kept baking, but the orders changed. Bulk trays, cold dough shipped across states. A corporate voice on the answering machine that said brand consistency, like liturgy. The old regulars still came. Some of them stayed. Some stopped coming because the magic felt rationed now, parceled out to a spreadsheet. It came on a Tuesday, unremarkable except for the way the sky had flattened into a certain pewter gray. Owen arrived to find the locks changed and a note taped to the inside of the glass. Property of Hale, Inc. It was official, stamped and subtle. Cal and Nate stood in the doorway with a man in a suit who smelled like a dry cleaning bill. "It's not personal," Cal said. He had the practiced softness of someone who wants someone else to own the lie. "We had to make decisions." "It's our shop," Owen said. "It belongs to all three of us. Legally, it belongs to the board," Nate said. "You can take a buyout. You can move on. There it was again, the move-on clause, spoken as if it were mercy. You don't understand the scale. Scale doesn't taste like anything, Owen said. Cal cocked his head and looked at him like he was an obstacle to be rearranged. You can open something else. Think of it as a chance to start fresh. Owen did not understand that chance meant they had repackaged his life into an asset and traded it for something they thought was secure. The anger that rose in him wasn't immediate. It built slowly, like dough relaxing until it had to be punched down. He left with nothing but his notebook and a few treasured cookie cutters shaped like stars and birds. The city smelled bigger and lonelier. He slept in his car for the first week, then in a patchwork rental above a laundromat, listening to the machines mimic a heart's sporadic rhythm. Every night he unrolled his notebook and read himself the recipes until he could recite them in his sleep. When hunger hit, he would go to a diner and watch the way people ate, who they were and what they wanted. Observation was always his first ingredient. Months passed. Cal and Nate's version of Hale & Co. hit a sweet spot of meticulous branding. They dropped the ampersand and installed a tagline about premium cookies for premium moments. Their stores looked like sets, bright, glossy walls, curated playlists, baristas who used techniques learned at a corporate training retreat. The product moved faster, smoother, and in larger numbers. The original shop's intimacy faded into an Instagram-friendly aesthetic. Owen watched from a distance. He let the anger temper into focus. He found a small walk-in bakery for rent in a neighborhood where the streets still felt like neighborhoods, not markets. The space was cramped and smelled of bleach and old ovens. It was perfect. He painted the window himself, thinned the paint until it ran in a way that felt like handwriting. He put a sign up that said simply, "Crumb and Kin." The name was a small rebellion. Crumbs are the honest residue of baking. Kin is the word that meant his people. He started small because he could afford nothing else. He opened only Thursdays and Saturdays. He baked late into the night and slept on a cot in the stockroom. It felt like beginning, and beginning had always suited him. He tried a simple trick. He replaced the glossy packaging with stained small boxes tied with twine. Inside he tucked notes. Not marketing. Notes. Eat with a person you love, one might read. Try it with coffee, another would say. People laughed when they read them, like children discovering hidden messages in a fortune cookie. A friend with modest influence posted about Crumb and Kin as though she had found a treasure. Suddenly, one morning, there was a line out the door. The local paper ran a small column. Old school cookie making returns to the town. A food blogger drove 2 hours after hearing whispers and filmed a short that framed Owen like an artisan against chrome backgrounds. The video caught on. Within weeks, the shop was humming faster than he could handle. But the thing about small, honest success is it attracts both warm attention and cold knives. Cal and Nate saw the spark and felt the itch. They sent a lawyer with a letter, demanding he stop using any trace of the Hale, recipes, and any branding that might be confusingly similar to Hale & Co. They claimed intellectual property in a manner that made Owen taste blood. The law was abstract, lots of words about market confusion and dilution of brand equity. Owen's hands shook when he read it. He sat on the stoop and watched steam rise from the fries at the corner diner. He looked at his old notebook and thought of the way his grandmother had once told him the only people who tried to own a recipe were those who never learned it for themselves. He could have folded then, paid whatever sum they'd demanded and gone on, opened a cafe in anonymity, made cookies for sleeping towns. He almost did, but the thought of Cal and Nate, parading his name, tasting the applause he had first heard, made a slow, precise heat rise inside him. Revenge did not look like ruin. It did not look like vengeance carved with knives. Revenge, as he decided, would be sweetness so irresistible people forgot the name on the storefront. He would create a cookie brand that felt like the internet had been waiting for it. His strategy was patient, cunning, and a little bit of the old school stubbornness. He honed recipes until each cookie had a distinct shareable moment, a crackle, a chew, a burst of unexpected flavor. He started rotating flavors weekly, surprising people with a new comfort each Thursday, and then pushing a crowd to argue about their favorites, to post pictures, to taste test in the comments. He photographed the process with a camera borrowed from a friend who ran a small magazine. He never hired a PR firm. He hired instead trust. He let go of the idea of one flagship cookie and made the cookie itself an event. A new flavor every week, a fleeting obsession. Some weeks were experimental, a brown butter with smoked maple that tasted like campfires at dawn. Other weeks he dialed back to the elemental, sugar and butter that tasted like a mother's lap. He named the flavors with little provocations that made people curious and crucially shareable. Social media did the rest. People started packing the sidewalks, posting the pink and baby blue boxes that became his signature aesthetic. He aimed not for perfection but for conversation. Crumb and kin grew, but not in a straight line. It zigged and zagged, as all good things must. When he couldn't fill orders, he slowed openings. When a batch flopped, he owned it publicly. Tweeted a picture and said, "We messed up. Come tell us how to do better." People loved seeing the humanity. He paid fair wages. He fed exhausted staff dinners. He trained his bakers to speak about the flavors not as products, but as stories. They told people where the vanilla came from. They told the story of the farmer who grew the coconuts that went into a decadent island cookie. Customers liked that level of connection. The week-by-week flavor strategy was not his invention. He'd seen similar things in the way bands drop singles, in the tech world's incremental updates. But he implemented it with the care of a monk. Every flavor was a small sermon, every release a liturgy. It annoyed and enraged Cal and Nate the way grass enrages someone who wants a manicured lawn. "You're creating scarcity," Cal snapped once, eyes glittering with a spreadsheet. "You're making it so people have to wait. That's not scale. That's manipulation. You just don't get people," Owen said. "People don't want to be told what to like. They want to discover it." When a boutique chain from out of state approached him about franchising, he said no. He kept the recipes close and the control closer. He refused the first offers because he'd seen how easy it was to turn a feeling into a commodity. He made a few small agreements with friends, tiny franchises run by people he trusted, people who would never think a recipe could replace a handshake. He learned how to use social media the way a radio station uses static. Subtle signals, frequent small interactions that made followers feel like insiders. The fans invented tasting rituals and voted on return flavors. Someone made a meme about the box color and it spread. Someone else made a late-night video about how his cookies were like a hug for your mouth. The nickname stuck. Crumbles, they said, laughing as if the name were inevitable. It was catchy and imperfect and perfectly suited to be a brand people claimed before it was fully built. The first serious attack came when a viral influencer, someone who trafficked in sharp opinions and had 1 million followers, posted a video of a crumb and kin cookie then, with exaggerated dismay, compared it to an old corporate cookie and said, "Sharp. Vindictive. They're copying their own legacy, only shinier." The comments poured in, ugly corners of the internet lighting up like moths to a flame. Someone made a doctored menu and tweeted it with the caption, "Same recipes, new box." Owen took a breath and did nothing at first. Then he went into the shop and started a small campaign, an online series where he filmed himself, late at night, explaining a flavor and showing the tiny choices that made it different. Viewers loved it. They saw the careful hands, the way he sprinkled salt like release, the way he tasted dough with a spoon as if it were the last thing he would ever eat. The transparency killed the rumor. People who'd loved him before loved him louder for the honesty. Still, the pressure mounted. Cal was relentless. He lobbied using old contacts to make the use of the Hale family name exclusive. He tried to force Owen into the uncomfortable legal gray where lawsuits could be drawn out until a man was tired enough to sell. They filed claims against every small supplier Owen used, hoping to suffocate logistics into compliance. Some nights, boxes of foundation mix went missing because a distributor, someone who had been paid handsomely by another company, misplaced the order. Owen adapted. He learned to hedge against fragility. He built redundancy into sourcing. He roasted his own little batches of a special brown sugar blend. He dried citrus peels in-house. He became a craftsman of contingency. Where someone tried to sabotage him with law, he responded with community. He threw free cookie nights for the local shelter and delivered warm boxes to the fire station. The town responded with loyalty. People who had once driven into the parking lot for convenience now drove an hour for intention. The most clever part of Owen's strategy was the way he weaponized joy. Instead of retaliating with spite, he created shareable moments that made people want to spread his name. He invited small musicians and poets to perform at the shop, turned Closures into secret menu reveals, and worked with local farmers, so stories wove into ingredients as naturally as roots into soil. His packaging evolved into a color scheme people began to associate with more than cookies. It was optimism packaged in pastel wax. The press called it an experiential cookie brand, and magazines wrote think pieces about authenticity in a post-brand world. Then came the partnership that would change everything. Naomi Reed, a marketing director from a boutique agency, came into Crumbl & Kin one rainy Thursday. She had a sharp jaw, a habit of tilting her head when she listened, and an honest curiosity that felt like sunlight. She tasted a lemon ginger batch and laughed with surprise. "You're not just selling cookies," she said. "You're selling a ritual." That conversation turned into experiment after experiment. Naomi thought in campaigns and chants, and Owen thought in crumbs and warmth. They tested pop-ups in cities where people loved indie culture: Portland, Austin, Nashville, each time packing boxes of experiments and watching them go viral like small flares. Naomi's genius was finding the exact point where people would become evangelists. A limited edition flavor released alongside an intimately filmed video of Owen talking about the recipe, distributed through tiny paid boosts to communities that loved food and authenticity. The first pop-up sold out in hours. Lines snaked around the block. People filmed themselves peeling open boxes on sidewalks, and their feeds filled with laughter and crumbs. When a national morning show wanted Owen on, he went wearing a plain shirt, and his hands still smelled like butter. He spoke without pretense. "Cookies should make you a little kinder," he said when asked about his mission. He talked about storytelling, about giving credit to suppliers, about paying bakers a living wage. He spoke in a language that felt like an invitation rather than a sell. Crumbl & Kin became a cultural thread. Fans called themselves crumb collectors. People tattooed little pink boxes on their wrists. The hashtag darn crumb drop trended when people started sharing taste reactions. Investors began calling, not the slick tycoons Owen had scorned before, but smaller groups who wanted to maintain the integrity of what he was building. He signed a few, ones that let him keep the weekly rotation and the small distribution. He held on to control like he held on to his grandmother's rolling pin. There were moments of dizzy success. He opened a second shop in a college town where students queued for hours. He launched a small distribution to select specialty cafes, yet every victory made the knives circle closer. The old company filed more litigation, this time alleging trade dress infringement, claiming that the colors and the ritual were close enough to cause confusion. Cal used phrases like brand dilution in interviews and sent letters to the small chains carrying Crumbl & Kin cookies, threatening legal action. He painted Owen as the opportunist, the man piggybacking on a family name. Owen laughed aloud when he read the press. The laugh was not joyless. It was the slight, tired thing of someone who'd been punched and realized he had more lungs. He wrote an open letter to his customers, not about law, but about origins. He posted a photo of an old tin cookie cutter with a faintly recorded note. "I stole this from an aunt at age 8 and used it until the edges looked like clouds." The internet reacted with a tenderness that made even cynics sniff. Support poured in. People emailed recipes in solidarity. Someone from a small artisan flour mill offered to send him a lifetime supply. A line of bakers, old and new, sent letters about how honest food mattered. The pressure made him sharper. He learned to anticipate legal moves and public relations stunts. He kept his face soft and his public voice kinder than he felt. He refused to be baited into rage. He kept the business nimble, small batch manufacturing, for quality, local pop-ups for demand, and a team of bakers who would never commodify a person's hunger. He invested in training and in community outreach. He opened a program where teenagers apprenticed under Crumbl & Kin and earned academic credits. He did not do these things for optics. He did them because he remembered someone had once told him family was about keeping people warm. There came a night when Cal stood in the doorway of Crumbl & Kin without knocking, the rain mixing with the streetlight like him. He looked older than his years, the kind of older that comes from buying time with money instead of baking it with hands. "Why do you keep calling it Crumbl & Kin?" he asked, voice neutral but frayed. "Because it's what people need," Owen said. He didn't soften. He poured a fresh batch into a tray and slid one across the counter. Because people come here and they feel like they're home. Cal tasted it like a man who had tasted many things and forgot what hunger felt like. He closed his eyes without knowing why. You made it a religion. I made it honest, Owen said. Cal left without a flourish, and in the weeks after, that Crumbl & Kin opened a small distribution deal with a chain of organic cafes. Lines lengthened, followers multiplied, and every time a journalist asked him what the secret was, Owen said the same thing. Make something that can make someone feel seen. Keep your hands in it. Give it away when you can. He kept grinding. He kept teaching. Not everything was perfect. Sometimes a batch would be flat. Sometimes orders would be delayed and bad weather would crater a pop-up. But the brand carried a stubborn soul, and people defended it as if it were a person they loved. The first part of the revenge was not a spectacle. It was a slow, relentless procession of small acts, of care, not of cruelty. He made the company better than the one that had kicked him out. He made customers feel like co-conspirators in a secret that spilled pink boxes on sidewalks and laughter into feeds. He won by making joy contagious. He fought when he had to and forgave the small betrayals for their own wages. Towards the close of the first year, when Crumbl & Kin had grown from a day-of-the-week curiosity to a weekend ritual across several neighborhoods, he received a letter. It was not a legal notice, but an invitation. The town's winter fair wanted to honor local culinary icons. They had circled his name among others. He looked at the neat lettering and felt a small, private tremor of triumph. It was not the victory he had imagined on that clear, outraged night when he'd left Hale & Co. But it was steady and bright, warm like the oven glow that had first made him believe. He went to bed that night thinking of flour dust and stories, of how you could build an empire with a recipe and a conscience. He thought of his old brother sometimes, and his feeling was not simple. He imagined Cal in a conference room, stripping away tenderness for forecasts, and Nate whispering promises he could not feel. He did not hope their empires crumbled. He hoped they woke. When the city fair came, he set up a small stall and served cookies that tasted like winter light. People queued in the snow. A woman came forward and hugged him because once, when she'd brought her boy into the shop, he'd given the child a little cookie with a note that said, "You're brave." Small ripples. Small victories. Someone took a phone video, and in a few hours it was a shared thing, an ordinary miracle packaged as a viral moment. That night, as he locked up, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "We can talk." No name, no signature. Owen stared at it. The way someone stares at an invitation to walk back into a room that once slit your skin. He stared until the numbers blurred. He did not answer. Instead, he walked home under the street lamps, past the postered walls and the tiny theaters where people still clapped after obscure films. He thought about what came next and knew the second act would demand sharper tools. The first year had taught him how to make people love a cookie again. The next year would decide whether love could outlast hunger for power. In the dim light of his kitchen, he opened his notebook and wrote, in a hand that had come to steadiness, a single line: "Build something that cannot be taken without being earned." Then he lined the page with new recipes. The rain had stopped, but in the city it always felt like the world was on the brink of blooming or war. He rolled a ball of dough and pressed his thumb in the center, the way he'd always done, leaving a small hollow for a future flavor. He hummed a tune that sounded like resolve and put the tray into the oven. The sound of it began, as it always had, like a steady heartbeat. The second winter after Crumbl & Kin's quiet rebellion came early and cruel, turning city windows into frost mosaics and streets into white-veined rivers of salt and tire tracks. Inside the shop, though, warmth was currency. The ovens murmured their hymn, and the air was thick with butter, brown sugar, and vanilla that felt like memory. The first year had been a war fought in silence, with flavors instead of fury, patience instead of poison. The second year, Owen Hale decided, would be the war of truth. He had built Crumbl & Kin with love. That was true. But it was love sharpened by purpose now. He'd tasted what betrayal could bake into a man. Precision. The world saw the pastel boxes, the joyful lines, the smiling man who always asked, "Did you eat it warm?" But under the charm was strategy. Each new flavor, each new limited drop was a chess move, subtle, brilliant, and deliberate. The brothers at Hale & Co. didn't see it coming. Their corporate headquarters gleamed in glass and ego, with an entire floor dedicated to culinary innovation, a team of technicians who followed algorithms for flavor trends. But trends fade fast, and Hale & Co. was beginning to taste its own decay. Profits were steady, but engagement was dying. People weren't talking about their cookies. They were talking about crumb and kin, about how it felt alive. Cal hated that word. He'd always despised things that couldn't be quantified. He sat in his corner office one morning, coffee cooling in hand, watching a viral crumb and kin clip on his tablet. Owen laughing with a customer, holding a pink box, telling her to save one for tomorrow, even if you can't. The clip had nearly 8 million views. He's manipulating people, Cal muttered, selling nostalgia like it's gourmet. Nate leaned against the window, less angry, more reflective. Maybe that's what people want. Maybe they miss when food had stories. Cal shot him a look that could have frozen the ovens downstairs. People don't buy stories. They buy convenience. Nate didn't answer. He thought about the last time they'd spoken to Owen. That night in the rain, the look on his face when they said it wasn't personal. He remembered thinking, maybe one day he'll thank us for freeing him. Now, Nate wasn't so sure who had been freed. Owen's freedom, meanwhile, was both blessing and burden. Crumb and Kin had exploded beyond expectation. They'd opened 5 new shops across the West Coast, each one hand-designed by local artists, each one built on the same founding rule. If it doesn't feel human, don't serve it. But with fame came pressure. The press loved him, yes, but they wanted a hero narrative, the betrayed brother turned visionary. Investors wanted scale. Fans wanted constant novelty. Every week, he felt the weight of millions waiting to be fed, to be amazed, to feel something. It was Naomi who saw the cracks first. She watched him during late-night baking sessions, sleeves rolled up, eyes raw from exhaustion, fingers trembling as he scribbled flavor notes on parchment. "You need a team," she said gently one night, when the moonlight caught the flour dust on his cheek. "You can't keep doing this alone." "I have a team," he said, half smiling. "You have followers," she replied. "You need protectors." It wasn't until the lawsuits escalated again that he understood what she meant. Hale and I Do. Co. filed a federal injunction, an aggressive attempt to stop him from using weekly flavor rotation, claiming it as a proprietary retail model. The absurdity of it might have been funny if it hadn't come with actual court orders, frozen accounts, and headlines designed to confuse the public. Corporate brothers claim indie bakery stole concept. The internet lit up again, half defending him, half suspicious. That was when Owen made his boldest move yet. He released a limited flavor called Betrayal. It was a dark chocolate cookie with streaks of red raspberry and a sprinkle of sea salt, packaged in a black box with gold lettering. On the inside flap, printed in cursive, were the words, "Sometimes the sweetest things are born from what tried to break you." The release date was the same day Hale & Co.'s injunction went public. The response was nuclear. Customers lined up overnight. Photos flooded every social feed. Memes were made. TikToks were filmed. And for the first time, a cookie became a protest symbol. "Eating my betrayal." Cookie in honor of every toxic boss. One caption read, "Corporate. Greed never tasted so sweet," said another. Hale & Co. panicked. Their PR team called it a tasteless stunt. Owen didn't respond publicly. He didn't need to. He just baked. Naomi called it the sweetest strike in marketing history. 3 months later, Hale & Co.'s began losing franchisees. Their brand was sterile now, a shadow of what people actually wanted. Cal tried to modernize. He copied Crumb & Kin's weekly rotation idea, painted the new shops pastel, and even introduced a community night. But it felt artificial. The internet called it Crumbl-Cookies. Sales dipped 40%. Cal grew restless. He called Nate into his office. "He's bleeding us out," Cal said. "One cookie at a time." Nate rubbed his temples. "Maybe he's just better, Cal. He's nothing without us. We gave him the foundation." Nate looked at his brother then, really looked. The gray around his temples, the lines carved deeper by pride and fear. "You took the foundation," Nate said quietly. "He built a home." For the first time in years, Cal didn't answer. Meanwhile, Crumbl & Kin prepared for expansion. Not the mindless kind, but a thoughtful leap. Owen wanted to open the first international store in London, inside an old cobblestone street near Covent Garden. "If we do it," he told Naomi, "we do it our way. No commercials, no franchising, just word of mouth and the smell of fresh cookies." Naomi smiled. "You really think smell travels across oceans?" He grinned. "Love does." The London shop launch became a phenomenon before the doors even opened. Influencers camped outside, journalists called it the apple of cookies, and fans shipped boxes across continents. But Owen didn't care about the press anymore. What mattered was the people. The laughter. The late-night confessions whispered between bites. Still, he couldn't shake a feeling, a tug, faint but constant, that the war wasn't over, and it wasn't. The email came on a quiet Sunday morning. It was from Nate. "We need to talk. Cal isn't doing well. The company's collapsing. I know we don't deserve it, but you should see him. N." Owen stared at the screen for a long time. The bitterness in his chest was still there, but softer now, dulled by time and triumph. Naomi watched him read it and said nothing. He flew back home 3 days later. The hail-encumbered building looked smaller than he remembered, sterile and tired, like an empire past its season. Cal sat behind his desk, pale and hollow-eyed, papers strewn around like fallen feathers. When he looked up for a moment, he didn't see his brother. He saw a ghost of the man he'd been when they baked side by side. "You won," Cal said simply. "Is that what you wanted to hear?" Owen shook his head. "No, I didn't want to win. I just wanted to bake." Cal exhaled, almost a laugh, almost a sob. "You destroyed everything. You destroyed us first," Owen replied, but his tone was calm, not sharp, not cruel. "I just stopped pretending that betrayal tasted like family." Silence stretched. Then, softly, Owen reached into his bag and placed a small pink box on the table. "Try it," he said. Cal hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a warm cookie, simple, classic, buttery, with a tiny crack down the middle. The scent alone broke something inside him. He took a bite. It tasted like childhood, like the nights before contracts and greed, like the kitchen light when the world was small and good. His eyes glistened. "What flavor is this?" he whispered. Owen smiled faintly. "It's called home." That night after he left, Owen walked alone past the old Hale & Cober storefront, now closed, the windows papered over, the sign faded by rain. He didn't feel joy, not vengeance, just peace. He'd turned pain into purpose. He'd turned betrayal into belonging. The world called it success. He called it balance. In the months that followed, Crumbl & Kin expanded globally. Paris, Tokyo, Melbourne. But the mission never changed. Every shop baked with the same mantra painted on the back wall. In Owen's handwriting, "We bake because forgiveness has a flavor." Years later, a journalist asked him during an interview, "You're the most famous cookie brand in the world now. Do you ever think about revenge?" Owen smiled softly, the kind of smile that held 1,000 sleepless nights and the scent of cooling sugar. "Every cookie I bake is my revenge," he said. "But it's the kind you can taste and still smile after." The audience laughed. The host smiled. But somewhere, behind every word, there was a truth that hummed like a secret in the air. That sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't destruction. It's legacy, and that's how Crumbl & Kin, the world's most beloved dessert brand, was born out of betrayal, baked with resilience and served with love.